Charlene Theodore to the Faculty of Law at the University of Ottawa and to introduce her to you as our speaker. She is a workplace lawyer with a background in public policy and government relations, and she currently serves as in-house counsel to one of Canada's largest teachers association. She has her BA from Carleton here in Ottawa, her LLB from Dalhousie University, as the dean of the Schulich School of Law pointed out to me last night on the telephone, very, very proudly. She articled and worked at the African Canadian Legal Clinic. She's also worked as in-house counsel at the Ontario Nurses Association before working for the Ontario English Catholic Teachers Association, where she has served as in-house counsel for the last number of years. She was named by Canadian Lawyer as one of the top 25 most influential lawyers of 2020, and she's known for tackling some of the most challenging issues facing the bar and the justice system, as well as for bringing positive change throughout the profession for women and for people of color. As the OBA's first Black president in its over 100-year history, Ms. Theodore, who's also a member and former director of the Canadian Association of Black Lawyers, has embraced her role in improving equality, diversity, and inclusion in the justice sector and beyond. Her groundbreaking initiative, Not Another Decade, is focused on moving the dial on equality for Black and Indigenous people and people of color. She's also committed to working with lawyers and law firms to reimagine workplaces through her Work That Works initiative, building productive, profitable, healthy, and inclusive work environments for all lawyers. We are really, really fortunate to have her with us today. I said to her before, there are few positive things to emerge from this pandemic, and she is certainly on that top list of great leaders and great initiatives that are happening in this pandemic time for our legal community. We have a great historic partnership with the Ontario Bar Association at the Faculty of Law, and it is my absolute pleasure to introduce Charlene Theodore today.
Thank you, Dean Dodick, for that warm welcome, and good morning, almost afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to join you today during Black History Month to talk about how the legal profession is taking action to foster meaningful equality within its own workplaces and the broader justice sector. The efforts we're spearheading at the Ontario Bar Association, in collaboration with like minded lawyers, justices, students, and educators, stand to have a significant impact on access to justice and client service. They also promise to bring new opportunities to you, the next generation of legal leaders, in terms of the positive change you can expect to experience and to achieve as you embark on your law careers. Now, I've been president of OBA, an inclusive and engaged association, 16,000 members strong, for nearly 6 months now. In one way, it's been a great whirlwind of activity. There's a sense of being carried forward by unstoppable momentum. And that momentum is really propelled by the work undertaken by previous presidents, the dedication of a community of lawyers seeking ever better ways to advance the cause of justice, and our collective commitment to core values that continues: equality and diversity and inclusion, chief among them. In another very real way, these 6 months have constituted a carefully plotted course, a deeply deliberate, thoughtfully orchestrated series of steps to channel a resounding call for greater equality into constructive action, to set the profession on a new path to progress. During this past year, we've all been made keenly aware of just how subject we are to forces well beyond our control. I mean, I'm delivering this speech from my kitchen, and that's proof positive of that. But I think many of us have seized upon this period of disruption to look critically and creatively at what we do, in fact, have the power to do in our own practices, what we have the power to do differently, to reinvent, and to change for the better. We've all pondered, even in the wake of magnificent upset and upheaval, how we can build something that will better serve not just our own needs, but the needs of others. Now, I took helm as OBA president, as Dean Dodick said, the first Black lawyer to be elected to that office and only the 10th woman since 1907. I took that office in September. We were in the midst of a pandemic and a global reckoning on anti-Black racism. The movement has had finally started drawing worldwide attention to the abuse of power, systemic racism, violent, unprovoked attacks, and pervasive prejudice wholly unchecked in those charged with the protecting the public. Now, even in the midst of this not unfamiliar but nonetheless alarming display of injustice, I did find myself cautiously optimistic because statements of support for those crying out in protest were coming from all corners, from individuals, professionals, organizations, and institutions who in earlier times have remained silent. And then, in response to those pledges of equality, those signals to solidarity, people like me and like you started asking, okay, great, what next? What form will your support take? And what are you actually doing to ensure that Black Lives Matter, not just in word, but in deed, in your workplaces? And that question of how to meaningfully and measurably move the dial when it comes to equality, diversity, and inclusion is one that lawyers are both primed and uniquely positioned to answer. As lawyers and future lawyers, as stalwart advocates and unparalleled problem solvers, as stewards of justice, and integral players in every chapter of social progress in this country, we are privileged to have the power to directly address issues as seemingly intractable as inequality and diversity. I've said before, we are not only a powerful voice in a chorus calling for change, we as lawyers are uniquely poised to serve as a powerful example of accountability and inclusion. And there are many ways that we do that. Not everyone in this virtual room, I'm sure, is planning to become, a lawyer working in social justice or work on the front lines in champion of civil liberties. But as you transition into your legal career, whatever path you may take, you'll find the way you conduct yourself every day with your clients, the way you interact with colleagues, the very culture you contribute to, regardless of practice size, setting, or specialty, will have a direct bearing on inclusion, diversity, and accessibility, and the impact you ultimately have in your role. Within a profession that's been historically slow to evolve, we've seen remarkable technological innovation over the past year as courts and lawyers quickly transition to virtual operations. I'm hoping to usher in a similarly accelerated, collaborative, concerted, and considered effort when it comes to modernizing the other aspects of legal practice that combine to empower and engage lawyers of different backgrounds, perspectives, cultures, races, and identities, not simply because the vitality and sustainability of the profession depends on it, but because I firmly believe that the very best hope for a just society is diverse and dedicated lawyers in safe workplaces given the platform to do their best. Through my initiative called Work That Works, the OBA is helping our members reimagine the legal workplace to create environments that are more flexible, healthy, engaging, modern, and productive, and ultimately more inclusive. We're providing strategies and tools that can be applied across the gamut of employment settings, whether it's big firm, in house like myself, small practice, in a private or public organization, or quite frankly, in another sector entirely, with the goal of, again, inspiring and equipping lawyers to do great work. Now, this isn't work we're undertaking specifically for women or racialized or LGBTQ plus or new or established lawyers. This is work we are undertaking for all lawyers because a vital and prolific legal ecosystem is one of unyielding equality where opportunities for contribution, advancement, recognition, and reward are offered to all. The premise of Work That Works is that if the workplace isn't working for everyone, it's really not working for anyone, including your current and prospective clients. I've seen a lot of examples of this in practice and also in discussion with other lawyers and organizational change experts in my Work That Works podcast. Now, the podcast is just I've really enjoyed recording it. I not only am the first Black president of the OBA, I'm the first pandemic president. And what I find the podcast has done is find a way to connect us all together in these conversations, even though we're working in relative isolation. And what the podcast is doing, it's providing a roadmap for creating more inclusive, innovative, balanced, and profitable legal workplaces based on tactics that others have deployed successfully and accompanied by practical resources to implement those ideas. I encourage you to check it out on Apple, Spotify, whatever platform you listen to podcasts on. As students at the outset of your legal journey, I'll think you'll find excellent and eye opening advice from those really challenging the status quo about what you should look for in a workplace and how you can best ensure your talents are channeled constructively and rewardingly. Now, in one episode, I spoke with two women lawyers who founded what they like to call a family friendly firm, where they allow the kind of flexibility that means, for one thing, that parents who work there aren't forced to miss out or worse, aren't penalized when childcare commitments take them away from the office. But this kind of flexibility is offered to all who work there. So it accommodates those who are also balancing different priorities, whether they be other caregiving responsibilities or volunteer commitments or even passion projects. Their emphasis on quality of work over long hours better serves clients, but it also brings talented lawyers of diverse backgrounds flocking to want to work for them in that environment. And those are the lawyers who will bring fresh ideas and the commitment that comes from being fully there at work because they're not being pulled in two different directions. Two lawyers, Jennifer Gold and Frankie Wood, they're partners at the firm. And what they understand so well is that for lawyers to fully engage in the work and perform at their best, they all need to feel that they can bring their whole selves to work. They're not about conforming to a culture that forces them to check important parts of who they are at the door, which could be their history, their community, or their connections. Rather, they're about encouraging and celebrating, and in the very best way, capitalizing on the different strengths and points of view everyone brings to the table. I feel the best legal employers are the ones who have the occasionally uncomfortable conversations and check ins that are critical to ensuring everyone feels safe and accepted being themselves at work. There have traditionally been too many legal workplaces that, implicitly at least, send the message that FaceTime and fitting in to a homogenized culture is the expectation and the chief measure of success. Taking deliberate, transparent action to eradicate that expectation or perception is really integral and foundational to building inclusion in not only recruiting, but retaining lawyers from all walks of life and in fostering diversity, dedication, and creativity. I can promise you this: legal employers are increasingly aware that there are deficits to a lack of diversity, to carrying on with a status quo that counts many out of what I like to call the advancement equation. There are client service costs that come from failing to engage a workforce that is reflective of and responsive to Canada's multicultural and incredibly diverse population, from business lost to business never captured. There's also a threat to a firm or organization's long term viability that is increasingly hard to ignore. I spoke to a lawyer on my podcast who wrote a thesis exploring the experiences of young lawyers in legal practice. He examined in particular their experience of private practice, mostly big firm employment, but the data he mined provides valuable insight into what this younger, values driven cohort, those who entered the profession just before you, what they're really looking for in a workplace. And again, their enhancements I think most of us in any generation would welcome. They include autonomy, the freedom to work when, how, and where you want, which harkens back to the idea that a rigidly defined schedule is excluding a lot of highly capable, ambitious people. He also spoke about the importance of being able to take ownership of projects and being assigned meaningful work. While certainly greater responsibility on a project is going to correlate with a greater and more impactful experience, I think there's a lesson here for workplace leaders in engagement. In large firms in particular, we're unlikely to eliminate hierarchy altogether, but ensuring there are mechanisms for all voices to be heard at least, and for contributions to be recognized, that'll go a long way to eliminating barriers to inclusion. Firm management can certainly create opportunities for all members of the team to witness the real world impact of the work that they do, to actually demonstrate, no matter what your task on a file, to demonstrate how your work connects to the bigger picture. Now, in turn, early career lawyers can take it upon themselves to learn more about an assigned case beyond their own tasks to better understand their role in the bigger picture and even identify where it might expand. This is the work the OBA is helping workplace leaders advance. Now, alongside every podcast episode, we provided members with what I like to call a cheat sheet for reverse mentoring. Reverse mentoring is an excellent practice for kindling a sense of passion and purpose in associates, and equally importantly, in providing a forum for fresh perspectives. A program like this pairs the most senior people in the organization with the most junior so they can mentor each other on their different areas of expertise and their different perspectives, which lets the younger cohort appreciate the impact and the meaning of their work while perhaps finding traction for their ideas, their new ideas and new perspectives with senior partners who are exposed to disparate views. There are so many constructive practices that workplace leaders, your future employers, can adopt and increasingly are adopting to really overcome a cultural inertia in law that often allows for only cosmetic change when it comes to fostering an inclusive and engaging environment that works for lawyers of all ages, all genders, and of all races, ethnicities, and backgrounds. Meaningful diversity and transformative innovation are achieved not by marketing strategies, but by substantive, sustained, and systemic change. Lasting progress in overcoming inequality is the aim of another initiative I launched during my term as president. Not Another Decade is a 10-year commitment by the OBA and myself to moving the dial meaningfully and measurably in equality, diversity, and inclusion in legal workplaces, but also in the wider justice sector and across a variety of professions and industries. Was really born of the idea that if we don't want to see the same headlines about injustice and exclusion that confront us every 5 years, if we don't want to continue to see those headlines 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, we need to take the opportunity now to set ourselves on a steady course that takes us forward in a sure footed, quantifiable fashion. So each year for the next 10 years, the OBA is introducing one target or key performance indicator for legal employers to embrace with accountability and challenging workplace leaders in other sectors to follow suit. We'll also be introducing targets for all of our stakeholders throughout the justice sector. Where we see disparities and inequalities, we want to be able to lead in collaboration to fix inequity in our profession. So this year, the target is to increase the number of organizations that have a feasible plan for equality, diversity, and inclusion in their workplaces. This is a big part of taking all the best intentions, the resources, and the heartfelt hopes workplace leaders have for equality and inclusion, and transforming them into what we all want to see: concrete results. To help them produce the outcomes they want to see piece by piece to ensure enduring progress. There are many things that go into creating a workable and effective EDI plan that will have the desired impact. Now, some of these essential elements include developing an honest assessment of the current workplace climate and benchmarks. This cannot be done without gathering data and seeking input from the communities with which you wish to engage. It entails looking at who's joining, looking at who's advancing, looking at who's staying, but also looking at who's leaving the organization. It also entails looking at the executive level to see if Black, Indigenous, and other racialized people hold positions of leadership not specifically related to equity, diversity, and inclusion. A good plan should set database goals that are ambitious but achievable and thoroughly connected with EDI objectives. It should engage staff at all levels while making very clear who is accountable for what aspects of the plan. It should ensure that the work of EDI planning, which is complex and time consuming, is valued and compensated and doesn't just fall to racialized and Indigenous lawyers alone. This is everyone's responsibility. I've said it before and I've said it again. If you are a leader at work, that means if you have the power to hire, fire, or otherwise influence the lived experience of the people that you work with, getting EDI right is a core part of your job. It is no longer it never was committee work or side of desk work. It is the core part of your job as a leader, and no matter what field you practice. A plan needs to feature honest, meaningful measurements so that it's clear whether efforts are that are produced that you're doing are producing the intended outcomes. And it should require a commitment to transparency, to reporting results regularly and clearly. Now, you may wonder what this has to do with you at this point. As students, you've not yet made the leap to practice. But as I said off the top, this is systematized effort that brings this is a systematized effort that brings substance to signs of solidarity. It's the profession's promise to you, up and coming leaders in law, that the places where you apply your unique talents and aims will make the best use of them, nurture them, and amplify their impact. This work is also a torch that you will carry. I'm going to be passing it on to you when you enter the legal workforce. Since this march to equality is ongoing, we all have a part to play in creating a culture where all opinions and expertise are appreciated and cultivated, and in building workplaces that bridge understanding, bolster loyalty, and breed the highest caliber of work. It's painstaking and it's an important ongoing effort. And as students and practitioners of law who hold principles of justice, fairness, and equality at our core, we can and should take a leading role in making it happen. So I'm certainly proud of the initiatives the OBA is advancing on behalf of the profession. I'll tell you one thing I know for sure. When it comes to achieving real inclusion, is that when communication in parties is in the form of pleadings and colleagues find themselves on opposite sides of the courtroom, the failure from a workplaces that work perspective is complete. If you're going to lead change in tomorrow's workplaces, we should all be asking ourselves how we can proactively identify and remedy issues before they snowball, and certainly before human rights complaints and the justice system is engaged. Now, how do you, the rising stars of a new wave of legal change makers and champions of equality, both contribute to and draw power from a diverse community of lawyers who are driving positive change? Now, I would certainly encourage you to make the most of your membership in the active, inclusive, and innovative OBA community. OBA members are invested in giving back to the profession, to lifting others up, to sharing knowledge, and to doing all they can to foster a bar in Ontario that is representative of our own demographically diverse province. These are trailblazers and these are your peers who want to help you carve out a career path that both satisfies you and allows you to shine. No matter where you are in your career, but especially to the students and the soon to be lawyers and the new lawyers just starting out, it's so critically important that you connect with people whose career journey and leadership approach you admire. I encourage you to seek out mentors, not only those whose practice area where you think you might like, or who want to take on the work you find interesting, but also people who conduct themselves in ways and who champion causes that resonate with you. Reaching out to that latter group will help you learn how to improve your practice, advance change, and be a better lawyer and be a better future employer. The OBA is where you'll find your friends, your cheerleaders, and your mentors, not to mention your future employers and client referrals. I hear too often from new lawyers about their struggle to overcome imposter syndrome, the sense that they're not good enough to accomplish the assignment before them, to succeed in the role they've been given, to contribute value to a team of high achieving colleagues. This is insidious self doubt that unfortunately disproportionately affects women lawyers, especially women lawyers of color, who are confronted regularly with a lot of unconscious biases or open assumptions about their abilities and aspirations in the workplace. Through the OBA, you have ready access to people who've walked in your shoes and who can advise you on how to navigate pretty much every stage of your career, even if that's simply reassuring you that the course that you're pursuing makes sense. The OBA does have a formal mentoring program to help match you with someone whose experience and insights will be valuable as you negotiate your particular journey. We also have professional development and networking events that lend some structure and support to your contact building and networking efforts while introducing you to leaders in the profession who are applying their own legal skills in fascinating, informative ways. Our Pathways to Power series is really popular. It's hosted by our Women Lawyers Forum, and it is an excellent example of this kind of drawing back the curtain to reveal where a degree in law can take you and connecting you with those models of professionalism and innovation who have blazed new trails. Equally important, the OBA facilitates a lot of informal community building events where you can chat with your peers and potential members from across the province in a relaxed environment, finding strength in camaraderie and community. A prime and very recent, as of last night, example of this type of event is the OBA's first virtual community block party that I co-hosted just yesterday alongside the University of Ottawa Faculty of Law's own Black legal mentor in residence, Samantha Peters. The online gathering was part of our Black History Month celebrations, and it attracted a tremendous turnout of, excuse me. I think my voice is evident of how much fun I had at that party last night. So it attracted a tremendous turnout of young lawyers and law school students who took full advantage of the kind of ask me anything style conversation while also enjoying some amazing beats from DJ Steph Honey and lively networking and a really unique opportunity to grow their community. Now, there really is no question that community creates opportunity. And the earlier in your career that you can take this to heart, the better off you'll be down the line. You can count on the OBA to continue to create space for students and lawyers with shared interests to come together and connect. If you're looking for a virtual gathering that appeals to you, I'm sure you'll find something that captures your attention on our new Community Hub page, which you can access from the Sections and Community tab on oba.org. Now, the Hub is a landing page for our existing and upcoming OBA community events, including social opportunities and our parent and caregiver network of support. It's regularly updated with new activities, and it's really designed to make it easier for you to just casually connect with colleagues, especially during this time. In addition to the mentorship and network building advantages that being active in the OBA offers your career, there are many other benefits to being involved in a diverse and dynamic community. Of particular note today are the opportunities it offers you to help create a more inclusive, accessible, and effective profession. You can begin that process of becoming an effectual and inclusive leader, a transformative force for good in the profession and the justice sector, and even perhaps part of the changing face of law by participating in OBA governance. It worked out pretty well for me. You can get involved in committees or section executives like the student or young lawyer divisions. The current chair of our student executive is, in fact, a University of Ottawa alumna. You can also lend your perspectives as a participant in OBA programming or as a contributor of section or magazine articles. You can also add your voice to OBA advocacy efforts. There are so many outlets to both expand your own profile in the legal community while also bringing fresh ideas and a new point of view to an association that drives critical conversations about the future of the profession and that relies on the diverse experience, expertise, and outlook of our engaged membership to propel us in the right direction. Equality, diversity, and inclusion are key to transforming all our efforts in promoting the rule of law, in advocating for clients and the underserved, in advancing the cause of justice into constructive action. As lawyers, we are in a privileged position to make a real difference in the world, to have an impact on individual lives and on how organizations and institutions operate, and also on the way that society responds to progress and protects our most vulnerable. And together, you, me, all of us, we are stronger and so much more powerful as agents of equality and critical change than we could ever be alone. Thank you so much for having me. I'm looking forward to continuing the conversation with you, and I'll take your questions.
Well, thank you very much. That was incredibly empowering, positive, and uplifting, and I exciting. And I invite the members of the audience to pose questions through the question and answer function. I'll maybe start us off with one question that may be timely and certainly relevant for students. You talked about looking for an inclusive workplace. And now is the time of year our students are looking for summer jobs, looking for articling jobs. I think it's fair to say it's more challenging in a virtual environment. You gave the example. So my question is really, what should you look for? What should students look for in help in choosing an inclusive work environment? You mentioned the example of leave policies, universal leave policies. Are there what are other indicia or questions that students can ask or look for?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And let me just provide some context. You know, I remember when I was in law school, there was a lot of advice that sounded like the last authority on how things should be through the interview process, OCI process, and they were all coming from my peers. And I think the important thing to realize is um, I think you have to be selective about who you rely on for advice. There's a lot of conversation about how to do this right. And, I think you should rely and reach out to people that have done this process before, not just one person, but get opinions from a variety of people about the questions you have. That's one thing where I don't know that a peer conversation is really helpful. Reach out to your alumni, reach out to your mentors, reach out to senior lawyers within the OBA when you're kind of discussing those conversations. The other context I'd like to say is, in the background, I know the very real perceptions of um, what it's like to talk about culture from the student or new lawyer perspective to a potential employer. I want to assure students that, the OBA has been hard at work for quite some time, working with our partner firms and stakeholders. And these firms are all, I would say universally very, very receptive to hearing what young lawyers think and new calls think, and to being able to answer questions about workplace culture and be open to hearing about, what they feel they need. And so I think that it's an individual decision, but for Black lawyers specifically in this time, it's been a particularly tough year, and I don't think that it would be anything improper if you were a Black lawyer to ask a firm, what their response was to the events of the summer. And know that in receiving that response, that every firm right now is on a journey. There isn't in the it's been just over 6 months. I don't think there is an institution out there, legal or otherwise, that has course corrected completely from the events of the summer. But I think it's helpful to have a conversation about what lessons the firm may have learned, and what support is specifically offered for Black students. And I would encourage the same for other racialized students as well, including students from the LGBTQ plus community, and Indigenous students. And I think that this is the time where women can go into the interview process, and men, because it's not maternity leave, it's parental leave. And more and more nowadays, everybody is facing different caregiving challenges. And I think having direct conversations about how a firm or legal employer supports its students in this new virtual reality, and asking, this is an exciting time. All of these organizations are rethinking how we do work, how we do it better. We're reimagining workplaces in light of the pandemic. And what the OBA is doing is saying, look, if we're going to reimagine workplaces, let us help you reimagine it and get it right from an equity lens. And, so I think that you're on fairly safe ground to ask employers about what the future of work looks like for them, and what it looks like for their racialized employees, and what it would look like for someone like you.
Great, thank you very much. We have a question from Juliet Napton, who I think is active in the OBA. Can you comment on how a racialized student or student from the Indigenous, Black, people of color community can find value in mentorship from a non-racialized lawyer? There are fewer senior lawyers from racialized backgrounds, Indigenous, Black, people of color community, than there is need for mentorship. But if they can foster the skill from learning what they can from multiple people, it will be so valuable as they develop their careers. Thanks.
Thank you for that question, Juliet. It's a great question. I kind of want to reiterate something I said in my earlier remarks. You know, when people talk about mentorship, you know, they tend to focus on skill. So if I want to be securities lawyer, I want to kind of get with a senior securities lawyer, and you're going to look at someone who's, you know, maybe been in the headlines and really skillfully perfected their litigation skills. The element, again, I can't stress that is important enough to add to that, is there are lots of great lawyers out there. There are fewer great lawyers that create great work environments. And I think if law students today are the future lawyers and they're going to be part of the change, when you're looking for mentorship, you don't only want to look at the practice skills of that person, but you want to look at how they treat people. Are they a good person? Are they trying to become a better employer in light of this? Are they trying to expand their skill set, and are they invested in the change that we all see happening around us? Those are the people that you want to look out for, and not all of those people are racialized. And like I said, it doesn't matter whether you're racialized or not. If you are in a position to lead, specifically if you are the power to give someone work, getting EDI right is at the core of your duty. And so you want to look for people who get it right. And those people aren't all racialized. If you look across the makeup of firms, in-house legal environments, it is not full of Black and Indigenous leadership. But the work is being done, and the work is being done by the people that are in charge of those institutions. And so I think that you can find value, certainly find value in non-racialized lawyers. But I also think that you should also be um, not afraid to check in with yourself and not afraid to set boundaries. And if you're in a mentorship relationship or any other working relationship with a non-racialized lawyer, and there is something that's making you uncomfortable with respect to your race or gender identity, that's the time to reach out to a mentor from your own community, however you identify, to help you navigate your way through that.
Thank you. So the next question follows up on one of your comments about um, there being few people of color in leadership in positions in management level at in both the private and public sector.
Mm-hmm.
Organizations do better to retain young people of color in their organizations to develop leadership.
Yeah, that's also a great question. I want to first, before I get into kind of the practical tools about retention, I want to just first provide a little bit of context, because I notice conversations, and I'm part of those conversations because I am the first Black president of the OBA. So while there is celebration wherever there is a glass ceiling like that broken, there's also lamenting. I can't believe it's 2020 or 2021 and we're just now getting the first this or the first that. But you know, I am the context in my example specifically, I'm the first Black president and only the 10th woman to lead the OBA. The OBA presidential term is 1 year. So since 1907, every year they've had a chance to kind of break out of that white male dominated hierarchical structure. And it took us until this long to do so. On one hand, um, that's not fast enough, right? But on the other hand, I think what people need to realize is that we work in a profession where historically Black people and women of all races were not actually allowed to practice, right? And so, you know, the theme for my Black History Month is standing on the shoulders of giants, and I'm really using this month as an opportunity to honor the people that came before me. Our history in this profession, um, uh, by legal exclusion, is still fairly new. And so I remind myself of that at times when it feels overwhelming or we're not making progress fast enough. But, I also take that as a note to kind of keep going. I think if we were moving quicker, we've made a lot of progress in this profession. But if we were moving as fast as we needed to move, I wouldn't be sitting down here with you today, kind of having this specific conversation. And in terms of what leaders can do to retain people, there's a few, lots of, it's like I said, it's complex work. Um, but here's a few practical tips I can offer. Number one, I think that it's pretty self-evident since the murder of George Floyd that people have all agreed that we need to start having conversations. And I think that sometimes employers and institutions miss that they should be multiple methods of multiple conversation tools to make sure that they get that true, unbiased, and unvarnished feedback from all of their employees. So some people like town halls. But some people are introverts, right? Some people may want to talk to a third party EDI strategist that a company has hired. Some may want one-on-one meetings with, maybe a um, uh, EDI ambassador within the company. I think that when you're checking in with your employees and having those conversations, I don't think people realize the value of having multiple streams and methods of communication to really have everybody give everyone the opportunity to contribute. People talk a lot about inclusion, and again, we all know what that means, but what I hear people talking less about is social inclusion. So that means, my parents are from the Caribbean. If or I'll give you a better example. I'm from Toronto. If I'm working with an associate, um, let's say an Indigenous associate, whose issues with regards to his or her respective community, um, uh, uh, reserve has been on the news. How comfortable does that person feel when we're gathered in the office virtually and we're all talking about our backgrounds? Or, if you come from a neighborhood in Toronto where there was a shooting last night, how comfortable do you feel um, broaching, like, hey, I'm going through a tough time, when everyone may have the same background where they come from a different socioeconomic class? So social inclusion means it's one thing to say bring your whole self to work, but it's another thing to foster an environment where people can bring their whole selves to work, and be able to really join in a community and a fabric within a workplace that is made up of different types of people. And the other thing with respect to inclusion, I talked about data being so important. I think one thing that all employers can do right now is start looking back at who's not there. Who left? When did they leave? And why? Are you doing exit interviews? Do you see a pattern? Right? Are women coming back from mat leave? Are your Black associates leaving? And more importantly, when they're leaving, where are they going? You hired these people for a reason. And if you have your associates leaving, the sole practitioner community is made up, there's a lot of racialized people in that space. And that's not just because of the joy of kind of manning your own ship and setting your own trail. It's because they're fleeing work environments that don't allow them to feel like they belong or don't show um, any path for advancement. And the last thing I would say in terms of looking at data is look at where your racialized employees are now, not how many you have, but where are they? Are they all doing doc review? Are they all, junior associates? Are any of them partners? Are any of them what files have they been on? I think, it's a multi-pronged approach. But those are just some of the quick things that come off the top of my head that people can do, and people can do fairly quickly, can implement fairly quickly.
Great, thank you. Again, I encourage members of the audience on the webinar to use the Q&A function to pose any questions.
I actually have a question for the audience.
Sure.
I would love to hear from you, and I'll let the dean say whether this should come in through the chat or the Q&A, or yelling out loud, which always seems to work really well on a Zoom call. I'd love to hear what you want in a workplace, what you want in a workplace, whether you envision it as something where we're back working together again, or whether your work environment is going to continue to be virtual. I would love to get a little intel on what you guys are looking for, since I'm kind of talking to a lot of your future employers.
I think that's a great question because again, we've got a mix of people in the webinar. We've got students, we've got faculty, we have staff, we have lawyers in Ottawa. I see we've got some lawyers from Toronto and elsewhere. So a good focus group for you.
Absolutely.
Well, while
Absolutely.
we're waiting for those responses to come in, let me take you back to law school. And, you went to Dal, you went to a great law school. When you're talking about, if we sort of transpose not another decade onto the law school experience, what can our students, both our students of color and our racialized students and our non-racialized students, what can they do during law school, both as part of their formal education and informal education? What can they do and what can we as administrators and faculty do to help prepare for the world and the profession that they will be entering in a couple of years?
Okay, I'm going to speak to the students specifically first, and I think my advice is going to catch you a little bit off guard, because I've shifted the nature of my advice on this in recent months. And if there is one piece of advice I could give you, it would be to take care of your mental health. Whether you're completely fine, never had a bad day in your life, this is a tough profession. And I think that, in not kind of giving that advice first and foremost, I do everyone a disservice, because if that's not at the forefront of your priorities as your career ramps up, you kind of don't have good coping skills and the tools for self-care, nothing else can really work with that respect. And so, the OBA has great support and mental wellness programs that we encourage people to use. We've been offering support not just to students, but to lawyers throughout the pandemic. And it may sound a little adverse. I should maybe giving you a set of checklists and join this organization and do this and write a paper on this and make sure you get interviewed. But honestly, now is the time during law school to really establish some practices with regards to self-care and mental health. It gets harder to do it as it goes on. And it's not until you're in the career that you realize how many of your colleagues, how pervasive the problem is, and how many of your colleagues suffer needlessly and silently. And so that's my first advice to students, first and foremost. Once you've got that set, I think all paths to impact start with community. When I was in law school, I was president of our chapter, our Dalhousie's chapter of the Black Law Students Association of Canada. And that's where you can really get things done, and that's where you can really set the agenda as a student. You guys have a lens on what's happening, what's needed in the profession that other people don't have. It is unique to you. And the only way to get that really get that advanced is through community. So whether it's through a racialized law students association, or whether it's through student government, there's only one path through, and that path is together, not alone. And that's where you'll find the support. In terms of, people who work in academia and staff, academia is a workplace, and it hasn't been exempt from both both the criticism and the constructive conversations about how to make things better. And the reassuring thing I will say is that my advice for the institution of academia as a workplace to do better in service to your clients, which are students and your staff, is no different than advice that I would give to a firm of any size. Right? The same steps are needed. You again need to look at data. who are your, who was your, I think it's pretty clear from your applications and your student body that your actual client base of those students are getting more diverse. How well is that reflected in your staff population? And, where is your staff? With the same example that I used in terms of where are your racialized associates? Are they all, in doc review, or are none of them making it to partner? Where are your staff? Are they, in the different positions of leadership and authority throughout the university? And, universities and academia are a unique place because I think where academia specifically has an advantage is we don't have to teach you guys how to have conversation and engage. Whereas with workplaces, I have to say, okay, well, maybe not just one town hall, and maybe not an email or an anonymous poll. And here's why that won't work. Here's how you have to do it strategically. Academia is well positioned to provide a platform for speakers to come in, for conversations to happen, for especially with regards to data, for research and support, to kind of be the natural underpinning of all your efforts to diversify your workplace. And so I think you're well positioned to do that. Again, the first step is always setting a goal, and you can't set a goal without looking at what the state of affairs is, right? So not just the staff who's there and the teaching staff who's there, but who's maybe left, and how the pandemic has affected them. And I know this is kind of the unanswerable question, but I know not just law schools, but educational institutions. I'm a lawyer, I work in education, but higher education specifically, they have a massive task to grapple with about what does the future of education look like when the future of public health is so unclear.
Thanks very much. I just want a couple of quick reactions that I totally agree with you about the importance of data. And surprisingly, I think in a academic environment, we've been really weak on data collection. And single out and acknowledge the leadership of BALSA Canada in advocating to the Ontario Law School Admission Service, which is the central body that everyone has to apply for all the Ontario schools to start collecting demographic data. That was supported very quickly by all the deans, but that was led by BALSA Canada, and BALSA Ottawa has advocated for the same at the University of Ottawa level, which we need all of that data. And I also wanted to acknowledge the OBA's leadership on the mental health file, and one of your predecessors, Orlando De Silva. You talked about the challenge of leadership with one-year terms as a president, and I'm trying to figure out if you're halfway through your term, 3/4 the way, what month the changeover is.
Well, time has no meaning during a pandemic, first of all. So how dare you put me on the spot with asking me a complicated math question like that? But I'm just about halfway. Halfway.
You didn't agree to serve as president for the whole pandemic?
Sorry, I shouldn't have laughed that hard. No, I did not. I don't know that we'll be out of the pandemic before my term expires. I'm hoping that we will be. But no, I didn't agree to be. I'm a pandemic president, but not the whole pandemic president.
So I think just as you've accomplished so much in the Not Another Decade initiative during your term, you're still incomplete term as OBA president. Your predecessor, Orlando De Silva, accomplished so much in raising awareness within the legal profession about mental health issues during his brief term and afterwards as president. And our students are very lucky that Orlando offered to be a mental health mentor in residence to our students here. So we benefit from that. We have a comment responding to one of your questions in the Q&A, again from Juliet Napton. One thing that I think would be so helpful is an anonymous place for people to come forward to bounce their feelings, reaction to an uncomfortable experience, to hear what another experienced, trained person would see it as, and provide support and provide tips. Not unlike the Law Society's discrimination and harassment counsel, but less quote unquote serious in nature. In other words, a non-judgmental way to check in to say, am I being too sensitive? Am I reading too much into this? What should I watch out for? What would be a good way to deal with this?
That I'd like to just elaborate on that in terms of one of the tips that I've talked about with on and off the podcast with people that kind of specialize in this work. One of the I think the biggest decisions with respect to, we're all lawyers, right? So data and privacy, it's not, we know that we can't just summarily go out, ask for people's information. It's not that simple, right? But in getting to that piece, I think one of the biggest decisions strategically that any employer faces is who is going to, is in terms of your EDI planning, is what's going to stay in-house and what should be outsourced, because that's a cost. It's a real cost. And I think that more and more people are learning that outsourcing at least the data collection piece has many advantages, and here's why. um, Number one, having a third party kind of be guardian of your data, not only it inspires trust, right, from your employees if you pick the right provider, and it also allows you to look at the data in a way that is unvarnished. And also, so in workplaces where maybe there's four Black people, not just associates, four Black people, lawyers and non-staff that work there, it allows the people who are much better and are trained in this data collection, it allows them to use the data and report back the data in such a way that it can't be aggregated to kind of out someone, as it were, right? There are ways that they can use that data and report it back so there's helpful information, but no one is specifically identified in workplaces where, in many of the cases that, we can identify kind of who the Black people are in our workplaces, and sometimes even who at least some of who the people in the LGBTQS community are. And So yeah, in terms of providing different ways of communication, one of the ways, the thing about outsourcing data collection and reporting, the other thing that it does is it inspires that other level of confidence, right, in being able to get honest feedback and honest answers and feedback from your staff. And so there's a mix of the town hall and the one-on-ones, and kind of having a workplace champion to go to, and someone who is a third party um, that has undertaken to not give any personal information to the employer. That's a great combination, of one, two, or more of those factors to put in the mix.
Great. We have a direct response to your question or your challenge about what's the future of the workplace.
Okay.
What should it look for? And then we've got another great question. So this response comes from Matthew Todres. I would imagine the future of the workplace is some sort of fusion between working from home and attending the office. As in-house counsel, I've seen flexibility in workplace arrangements even prior to the pandemic. My company has shared offices where colleagues rotate working from home and using the office. This is beneficial as it saves the corporation the cost of leasing larger space. As a lawyer, I enjoy the flexibility of being able to work remotely on days where I'm engaged outside of the office, whether that is attending at a courthouse or needing to take care of personal matters. However, as a junior lawyer, I cannot deny that there are real benefits to working in an office environment. One benefit that comes to mind is the ability to walk into a colleague's office and discuss problems I'm having on a certain file. Remote work
Mm-hmm.
and the office environment both have their benefits, so I think a flexible environment allowing for both is necessary.
Thanks so much for that, Matthew. And I'm pretty much I feel the same way. And again, as someone who works in house, we have long discovered that flexibility is what really produces the best work. As in-house counsel, I don't need to. I have one client, and they hired me. Right. And so FaceTime isn't actually a thing in my workplaces. I get my work done where it is convenient for me to do so. And I come kind of in and out of the office as needed, which, spending a fair amount of time in the office, but I do have the flexibility to work from home or work in another city if the occasion calls for it. Um, what I would like to draw people's attention to, though, is Matthew made a good point about new lawyers and junior lawyers. And so, yes, ideally, having that flexibility and being kind of close and really physically connected to a team, especially as a younger lawyer, is it's best. No one's no, I couldn't agree more. But the reality is that we have today, since 2020, people entering the profession, getting first jobs, getting new jobs, being called to the bar, while that's actually not possible. And so I think my call to the profession is let's deal with the now, right? I don't know when that virtual thing is going to happen and I don't know what that's going to look like. But right now, there are lawyers and law students out there right now that need that connection. And so I would, again, call on you to kind of put your innovation hat on. Uh, at the OBA and at my primary workplace, OECTA, we've onboarded new employees during the pandemic. Get creative. I know that there are employers that have like daily WhatsApp check-ins. What coffee mug are you using today? What slippers or socks are you wearing around the house today? There are things beyond Zoom and new innovations coming out all the time. If you're an employer that relies on Zoom hosts regular calls with their stakeholders to talk about security and innovative ways to use the platform. We have to kind of deal with the here and now and really, really lean into looking at management models outside of the legal profession who really focus on virtual engagement, virtual teams, and things that are really going to work. I would encourage everybody to lean into it now because students and young lawyers are doing this work at home alone now. So yes, when the day comes when we can have those hybrid arrangements, that's fine. But today, yesterday, take a look at how you engage, who's checking in on your young lawyers. If there was a young lawyer or a student that you didn't give a job, check in on them, see where they ended up, see how they're coping, see how they're faring. Refer them to us if they don't have anybody to kind of provide them that support. It really is the time to lean in. I could not imagine doing the work of law school, or studying for the bar or onboarding at a new firm or organization in a pandemic. And so that's really what I would encourage you all to do.
Thanks very much. We've got, I think, what will be our last question, which is a really important question. It comes from an anonymous attendee. How can lawyers who are the quote unquote token person of color in their workplaces avoid the expectation to quote unquote educate everyone else on issues relating to diversity? There is often an unspoken expectation that they should be the mouthpiece on this issue.
I am so glad, whoever you are, that you had the courage to ask this question, because it is these are all my favorite topics, but this one I think needs a lot of perspective shifting. So let's talk about tokenism. It's often associated when you have one employee of color in the workplace or in management, right? So I'm the only Black employee in management at my workplace. By that definition, I'd be considered a token. I am here to tell all of the racialized people that have been called tokens or felt like tokens that you are not the token. And tokenism happens irrespective of what numbers you have. So if you have a firm and you have 20 Black lawyers in that firm, none of them are advancing, none of them get good assignments, none of them included in social activities, they're all tokens, right? If you have one lawyer that is included, allowed opportunities for advancement, that one lawyer is not a token. When Black and racialized people arrive at your workplace, they are lawyers and they are there to do their work. I am a workplace lawyer. If I'm arriving at an all white workplace, I am a lawyer. I'm there to do my work. If you're a Black securities lawyer, you're at a law firm that deals in securities, you're not a token. Tokenism happens not by me existing, but by you, the employer, treating me as such and not creating a good environment for me to work. It's because you hired me to check a box. But so I am never a token. You are never a token. And I think that our anonymous questioner was right when he said there is an expectation that these things that are put on people, racialized people who are the only or the minority in the workplace. But I think that if you are feeling like a token, it is due to no fault of, um, it has nothing to do with your race, gender, or any identifying factor. It also has nothing to do with the fact that you're the only one of whatever in that workplace. It's probably because you don't have a good employer that doesn't value your work equally to others in your field. And so, quite frankly, if you're feeling like a token at your workplace, that's where your networks come into handy. I've taken every opportunity I've had to work throughout my career. And I've always kind of looked at the situation for what it is, good and bad, and used each opportunity to just hone my skills and leverage that opportunity into another one. But the tokenism conversation is very important. But I think it is the work of non-racialized people to get rid of that stigma of tokenism, whether real or perceived. Tokenism has nothing to do with numbers, and it has nothing to do with racialized people in and of themselves just existing in a workplace. It is from non-racialized people in power in that workplace that kind of environment's created.
Thank you. Can I ask you maybe to follow up on the second part of the question about
Sure.
the expectation on people of color to quote unquote educate everyone else on issues related to diversity? There's often an unspoken expectation they should be the mouthpiece on this issue.
Thank you. I didn't, I forgot the other half of the question. So thank you so much, Adam. I think that for racialized people, especially for Black people in this moment, it is about setting your own boundaries. Um, you know, I was on the board of cable. I was president of Black Law Students Association. I'm president of the OBA. I'm a joiner. I like to have these conversations. But even myself, I don't necessarily take speaking engagements where I am expected to educate people on what it means to be Black, right? I have conversations about how can we make things better, and do you have strategic advice that we can learn from? And so there's room for all conversations, but I think that especially in this moment, and especially for Black and Indigenous students and future lawyers, you have the right to set boundaries. And I also think it's kind of your duty to set boundaries around those conversations, because we won't make it through this time of racial unrest as relatively as unscarred as we can if we submit ourselves to those conversations that we feel debase us, and debase our people. And conversely, the people who are on their learning journey with respect to not just equality, diversity, and inclusion, but an instinctive and reflexive response that is based in dignity of each and every individual person, they won't learn if they don't have pushback about those types of questions that are oftentimes wholly inappropriate. And so I think that you have the agency to set boundaries in whatever way you see fit, whether that's saying, I that's not something that you would ask if it was me, a man in my position, or just by simply saying, I don't speak for the Black population, and keeping it moving. I think that I think in a sense that we all know what to say, but sometimes you just need to know that there are people out there that think it's okay for you to say those things, and that support you, and that support you in pushing back, and support you in removing yourself and going for a better work environment if that's ultimately what's necessary. But you're not, the expectation to be a mouthpiece does not in any way correlate or translate into your obligation to opine on us as a race. The expectation is what the expectation is. It is in no way related to your obligation to meet that expectation.
Thank you very much. Those were, answers to really, really important questions.
Thank you.
I want to end just with a comment from one of the participants that came in earlier, which I can't think of a better way to end than to read this from Eileen Goulet. Thank you for holding this event, and to Ms. Theodore for your commitment to making workplaces work for everyone. When I was a young lawyer in the mid-1980s, things were starting to change ever so slowly. Progress is slow, but is happening because of people like you. Thank you, and God bless you in this work, Eileen Goulet. So
Thank you, Ellen.
I think Eileen speaks for all of us today on behalf of the Faculty of Law and of the legal community in Ottawa. Thank you so much for coming here with us today in this space and really sharing your knowledge, your experience, and your inspiration with us today. Thank you so much. Good luck to you and to the OBA, and we look forward to continuing to work together. And thank you everyone for attending.
Thanks, everyone. And thanks for having me.